Microphone on, microphone on. Okay, now we are online. Hello everyone.
Hello.
This is our last Sparta episode for this year.
And we are very happy to have Isabelle Andriessen here today. Hi, Isabelle.
Hi.
Hi. Sound is also working. Okay. So today everything goes as usual.
We also have a Q&A afterwards, and the link will be posted under this video. And so we will just give the word to you. So
okay.
Hi. So hi everybody. Like nice to be able to talk to you. And so my name is Isabelle Andriessen, and I was invited by Till and Sunda to do this lecture on my work, which I'm really excited about. So I will start it now. I some time ago called it zombie materials because that is basically how I call my materials. So I will start the first slide. I have like a collection of inspiration, or perhaps I'll just go back. The thing is that I make sculptures in which I try to animate inanimate synthetic materials, which means that I don't work with organic material, but I try to make synthetic material perform over the course of one and several exhibitions in order to sort of push them between the gray zone or like the twilight between living and non-living materials. And the reason why I gathered this inspiration to start with is that some time ago I asked myself these questions like, what would our environment look like, say, in X time from now? Like, I'm very inspired by science fiction stories from G.J. Ballard, but also like from writers from the 70s, but also like from current writers, for instance, like Jeff Vandermeer, who wrote the Area X trilogy. Anyways, so I wonder, like, what will remain? Like, what I'm fascinated about is that the materials that we use and make will outlive us. Like, I think, or this is my idea. Like, I'm fascinated that we pollute our environment with something that is sort of killing us, so to speak, or like that is creeping under our skin. So for instance, I'm interested in the sort of crossover between science, but also science fiction, where there's like, in science, there's knowledge that a lot of materials that are used in plastics or to make plastics creep into our pores of our skin when we touch it or when we are in contact with it for too long. And of course, quite recently, like these materials are being demolished, like are not in use in our everyday today products, but still manufactured in China or mainly in China to make our everyday life objects. And what you see in this slice is on the, I think for you left as well, is like an image of a trash site in Africa, where they like reuse the technical materials that we have, like computers and like all the engines that we're using, and they are burning the plastics and like in order to sort of reuse these rare metals. So I think, yeah, my objects, like my sculptures, derive from this quite dystopic environment, and these environmental scenes where the consequences of our acts as a society, as a group of people, have been, I don't know, like as we are living right now in the third lockdown, are slowly like leaking into our lives, disrupting what we're doing. And then I believe it's going to increase more and more, or at least that's the environment or like the landscape that I find interesting. And I find interesting where the next slide in this case is, it's just showing more trash. This is the last picture. Like for instance, on the right corner, there's like a rock in which the plastic that remains in the ocean, like on the different oceans on our planet, there's like different specific patches of like huge, like humongous fields of plastic, like floating in the ocean, being like morphing in with the natural materials that live around us. And the reason why I show this slide is I'm kind of curious what sort of new breeds, what sort of new life or like different semi-living entities could evolve with these dead materials. So to say, like, I'm interested in how can dead materials like morph together with living materials, or how could like dead materials slowly become alive? Like going back to this sheet, for instance, I'm imagining that at some point this will also have an evolution where it sort of creeps and leaks and sort of potentially has some sort of like synthesis where, I don't know, like what if this is the source of life? What if like this is our new landscape? What if this is what we will be living in, or that we maybe won't be living in, but that is still on our planet and remains on our planet? Could it be like the starting point of new life or somehow living entities? So this is, having said this as a, I don't know, just like an insight in the landscape that is in my brain, I start to show you the start of this way of working. So what you're seeing right now is a piece of ceramics, like a very small ceramic tile that is conducting electricity and therefore heating up and therefore melting materials. So at some point I started to work with ceramics, metals, plastics, to see how these very sturdy and stable materials can be bent and how their properties can be bent so that they either transform physically or like form a canvas for transformation, so that the sculptures I'd be developing slowly transit into performers. So for me, it's super crucial. Like I'm very much researching how sort of the breed between sculpture and performance. Like how can a sculpture be a performer? How can sculptures be a performance? Or how can like an installation form a performance that is showing itself in numerous ways over the course of one and several exhibitions? So this is the first installation I show you. It's called Resilient Bodies, which is the first time I worked with ceramics was here. It was a result from a residency in a ceramic workshop that I'm currently working again. And what you're seeing is these sort of, I don't know, like rudimentary shapes from ceramics that are conducting electricity to it. So each sculpture is connected to the circuit to be heated up and therefore like melt different materials layered on top of them over the course of time. So I'll just like go to it, and we can always come back to it if any of you have questions during the Q&A. And so this is an example of how this work was like. This was an image taken, say, before the opening, and then this is what remains after like 3 months, and it would still continue to melt and then show like the layers of materials that are like casted within the wax that is on top of the piece. Just the detail. Then I go over to a next slide. So then in 2017, oh yeah, I didn't go into my bio. I can do that at the end. I don't know if it makes sense so much. So then in 2017, I started at the Rijksacademy, which is a postgraduate, I guess you all know, in Amsterdam. And so my idea was there to research a bigger range of materials that I could somehow animate. So basically all new series of work starts with the question, how can one material physically react to another material, even though it's synthetic? So even though it's meant to be stable. So in this case, I started to see if I could like grow chemical crystals onto ceramics. And this is just an image of the first test. So I thought when making this presentation, I thought it would be nice to sort of show yeah, like the way I work also, so the way my material research is done. And so just to give you an idea, I just start with the first work that is sort of marking the start of this whole body of work, and then I will end with some, you're going to see like a scoop, like you're going to see the first images of the works that I am working on right now, which is for like 2 very big solo shows, but not even the directors have seen it. So you're going to be the first one to see it. And I'm quite anxious about it as well, because they just came out of the kiln and they're not finished. But so going over to the next. So this was a presentation I did called Plastic Coma. It was the presentation I did in the first year of Rijksacademy, which is showing the results of that research I did. Yeah. So this is a ceramic piece where then iron 2 sulfate is growing from. So what you're seeing is a hollow sculpture from ceramics that is containing a liquid that over time is being absorbed by the material itself and sort of sheds a crystalline skin. Like the substance is like the moist inside is dissolving by the humidity or like by the air, and then pushes crystals out over time and shuts it down, and then continues and continues until, yeah, in this case, this piece is like activated for about 6 months. And then, yeah, depending on the context where it's shown, I can sort of reactivate that performance and it will continue to act and change. This is another research I'd done in the same year, because I was like at that moment very much looking into finding ways of adding human features, like human or living metabolism, onto synthetic materials. And in this case, I chose to see if I could make a material sweat. So I started researching how that could be done, and I came to, yeah, with help from different technicians, I came into a point where I was like cooling down metals by electricity. And because, for instance, now this is like a very small piece, like it's a very first step in that direction. It's a copper piece that is being cooled down by something that's called a peltier. And because it's cooler than its surroundings, like a can of cola or something, it forms moist from the air, like it's basically contracting moist from the air and then releases it. So one could say it appears as sweat, but yeah, well, that's up for perception. This is just a technical image of this. Like just as an idea, it started with like this very small copper piece, and then I made an aluminum piece. So like a lot of times I'm like looking into properties from materials. For instance, if I need to cool down a material, I look into properties from materials that are very temperature sensitive, like aluminum, silver, gold, copper, and then see like, is this something that I can cast, or is it something that I can shape or weld? And so therefore, like, how can I cool it down? What techniques do I need? And so this is how, together with the ideas or like the images that I have in my head, like how sculptures come about. And so this was the first larger piece. It's about, say, like 60 by 50 centimeters. It's not so big yet. And if you take a closer look, like you can see the droplets. I have a small clip here. It's very noisy. The technique I used back then was like making a lot of noise. And so I know that the video might be disrupted sometimes, but I took this video I have better videos later, but I took this video to really show the surface. So from the outside, like from a distance, you wouldn't really see the droplets, but then when you would take a closer look, you would like see the moist coming down, collecting on the floor, yeah, forming like this puddle of sweat or like moist from the air. Then I was trying to enlarge that technique with different techniques. I will spare you all the details because we have quite some, I'm not keeping the time, by the way, but we have quite some time to go. So this is a bigger piece that I was trying to cool down. Yeah, that's what I want to say. This is a piece I made for an exhibition in Lafayette Anticipation, which is a private institution in Paris, funded and initiated by the Lafayette family, the people that Guillaume Housset, but like the family that owns all the Lafayette and BHV and all these big commercial shops in Paris and warehouses. So this is Tidal Spill. It's next to the aluminum piece. It's a bigger series with sculptures that I developed and also started to research how to make these processes more installational. Like I was wondering, like, how can I form like this landscape around the sculptures that hints to this environment that I envision these entities in. And I experimented with like different chemical crystals, and there's like tubes lying on the floor that are connected to the compressed air running through the building. And every now and then there would be like a fragrance, like that you see in the back. You see this like silver tube, and it would contain a scent that I had developed with a scent maker in order to enhance this landscape that I imagined these sort of sculptures to belong to. And the title derives somehow like back in that days. So those days I was like reading the Area X books from Jeff Vandermeer, where, for instance, you might know the sort of cheesy one part of it. It's called Annihilation. It's a film that you can find on Netflix. I don't think it's as good as the book. I think the concept is very interesting, but I don't know if it's executed very nicely. But anyways, that's where the title is coming from. And then over time, the liquid would come out of these sculptures, like deform the landscape around the objects. So here you have a closer look of these crystals like leaking down and sort of like colonizing or like taking over the space around them. And here the next slide. So this is the first time where I showed these pieces in Paris in 2018. And then later that year, I had shown them in Stedelijk Museum, a Dutch contemporary museum in Amsterdam. And then you can see that also like the sculptures transit. So the formation and the process that the sculptures go through is quite slow. I think it's often not something that you would see in one visit, and that might make it very painstaking and boring or not so impressive. But at the same time, I'm interested in like stretching time, or like I'm interested in this moment where the viewer can be a witness of something whilst also missing the final moment, like missing where like this action is happening. It's like it's going so slow that you know it's changing. You can tell from what you're looking at that it's changing, but you sort of miss it at the same time. So I'm like trying to apply different elements that are involved in performance, try to tweak them so that I can have like to reinforce them into the sculptures that I'm making. This is a short film, like documentation. If it's not working so well, because in my screen it's like stopping for a bit, but I'll just go over to the next slide. I don't want to bother you with, oh, it's working now. it just gives this very close-up view of how these crystals are like pushing itself out of the surface from these objects. Since 2018, I've been constantly like taking these clips to almost like as a fly, like zoom in on the object and yeah, see the sculpture from a way that you would not necessarily see when you would see the exhibition itself. Right, so I'll go over to the next slide. So this is a detail shot from the sculptures from Tidal Spill, say like 6 months after they were first shown. I will go over it just to stay in time. So this is another chemical ingredient that grows in a different way from the surface. I'll skip the video. Again, another detail shot. I'll just go through images sometimes. And this video clip shows sort of a detail shot of how like layers of crystals grow and then fall down and then reappear under the surface. And so they continuously shred their skin, grow, and then continue. And at the same time, many of these crystals, these chemical ingredients, they change color over the course of the exhibition. Like in this case, so, excuse me. So this is like, say, about 7 days after the opening, and then this would be after a month after the opening. So then it sort of shows the transition. This is the final presentation I did at the Rijksacademy, Terminal Beach, named after a chapter from a book from T.J. Ballard, The Drought. And yeah, it's just a next step, I guess, in the research where I was really trying to combine the sweating surfaces and the sweating objects with the crystal growth in order so that they can enhance each other, so that they can feed each other, if you will. Like I'm trying to see how all the sculptural ingredients can be built on and built from and become more and more complex. Like if I could, I would like to create this very interactive like feedback loop. So like how can like the sweating respond to the sculpture and its crystal growth, and how can the crystal growth be responding to the moist, and how can they sort of like become not necessarily like a perpetuum mobile, but like how can they sort of like push each other and affect each other. And then this is a documentation shot again from how the works were shown later on in the Lyon Biennial that I was part of last year. Here you can already see how like puddles of moist are like collected in the sculptures, and the crystals are like, I think the pieces by now then were like about a year. And so they are like changing color. And then of course, I had the opportunity to use the environment to really have the crystals spread around. Here's like a detail shot from the work. And I'm still like trying to improve ways so that the moist is more present or like more visible. But I'm working on that as we speak. Yeah, and so here's a few more shots from that work. I'll just go through it a little bit. I think this particular video gives a good idea of how this interaction happens. So because of the shape of the sculpture, it collects the moist, and the moist then again also feeds the the crystals that are inside, so the substance that is inside feeds it so it can continue and continue to evolve. For me, this is like a next step or like a next transition in the progress of my work, where I'm really trying to have multiple materials, so like melting materials, leaking materials, sweating materials, crystal growing materials, all collected in like one big series, like continuously interacting with each other and becoming more and more, so that the sculptures grow more and more complex. But also, like, I like to think of my sculptures as parasitic. Like, I like to think of how can these objects sort of colonize their surroundings? Like, how can they be activists? Like, a thing that I think of a lot lately since the beginning of this year is that I want to show some sort of like hidden agenda in the objects that reveals a nature that you wouldn't necessarily see at first hand, and that can also be questioned in its integrity. Like, what is the nature of these materials? What is the nature of plastics? Like, they're serving us now, but like, what is their purpose, or what is their place in our world and environment in 50 years? Like, will they pollute us? Will they, like, it's like so much research is done. This is just a metaphor, like an example, but so much research is done of how much plastic our bodies already contain because of all the materials that we are constantly surrounding with and that we're constantly touching. But it's these interactions that literally creep under our skin and we don't know of. And it's not harming us either, because the balances are still sort of fine and we will cope with it. And I'm just wondering, like, what sort of new evolution would come with it. So now I'm almost like to like newer pieces. These are just a few smaller pieces that I've made. Like, normally I like to make installations. I find it somewhat easier to like physically relate to the size of the objects that I work with, and to make more commercial work like this in this case, which is like about like 30 centimeters, or no, this is not true, 60 centimeters. It's a bit harder, or like it's just a different breach in the work. This is a work called Ivory Dampers. It's the first outdoor project that I was asked to do for Lustwarende, which is some sort of international sculpture park in the Netherlands, which was an amazing opportunity to have these material interactions happen outside. I don't know, I'm going to skip this video again, which really interact with the moist in the air, really like making, like speeding up this crystal growth and like changing the color also of the objects, which was something I don't know, couldn't necessarily foresee in the start. So the sculptures were a bit like minty green, and then they became more like bone color or like ivory color, which was not necessarily in my intentions, but I couldn't get rid of it either. So it's sort of like, this is another example of what of sometimes what happens in my work, where it is in many cases happening that the sculptures behave in their own control without my aspect as an artist being in control. Like, they change color or they behave differently because of environmental conditions. Like, if the room is very moist or warm, they would like behave in a different way than when it's dry and cold or something. Which I find it's definitely the surrounding climate of the space it's shown in is definitely something that I like to be part of. This, like, again, like for me, a huge admiration is Pierre Week and how he thinks of the institution as a place or like a site for performance and a site of this sort of habitat where like these different actors are constantly at play. So like, what might not be very present in my work, like I try to find this very fine balance between science and sculpture. Like for me, it's really important. I do not often really speak about how the forms and the shapes are chosen in my works, because it's a deliberate, but then again also more intuitive thing where I'm like allowing myself to be looking for an anatomy, like something that is happening under the surface of the material, something that is might be creeping out. Like I'm trying to find a fine balance between something that I don't know, I can skip back to this image, like something that we recognize, but yet again, we don't know what it is. And this is something, it's one way of explaining the term uncanny, which has many different uses. It's basically, Freud was one of the first people, I think, trying to define what uncanny is. He would call it the unheimlich, which is something that attracts and at the same time is very repulsive and disgusting. And I'm not saying that this is something that I succeed in necessarily in my work, but it's definitely something that I'm after, or like something that I try to research also, like visually in the making. So yeah, I go over now. So I'm actually maybe doing good in time. So I'm actually, this is the last slide. This is how I continued to show this work, like say half a year after it was shown first. So this is in a museum, Stedelijk Museum Schiedam. And so now this is the very first floor plan. I mean, it's very empty still, and it's very in process, but like next year I'll be having 2 solo shows, one in the Pont, which is a museum in Tilburg, a contemporary museum, and in a space of about 800 square meters. And then a couple of months later, I'll be having a solo show in a museum in Neuchâtel in Switzerland, which is called CAN, Center Art Neuchâtel. And so this is just, I don't know, I find it a little bit scary. Like I'm giving an insight in, I guess, how I start working and how things evolve. And it's I'm at the moment working on the biggest production I've done so far, because in Neuchâtel the space is about like 200 square meters. In this case, what you're looking at is 800 square meters, and it's I want to work with ceramics, glass, aluminum. It's going to be the first moment in my body of work where I really will make the installations more complex. Plus, I'm working on a video, which I cannot show you, but it's a lot at the same time, while also being responsible for the full finances, because the museum won't pay me anything. So no fee, no production cost. So it's a lot of fundraising that I've been doing this year. Anyways, the first clips, here we go. So this is what I just got out of the kiln yesterday. We are trying to, this is the object on the right. That I mean, this is just a part, like I'm trying to make large parts that will be like having metal rods going into glass pieces will be connected. So it's just really nothing. It's just really the first part. And this is the team that I work with. Like it takes about like 7-8 people to get the sculpture up, and just in general, like working in the workshop. And then there's another sketch, again, might change completely. It's the start. I have these objects. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't put any images in. No, it's these actually. I'm glazing them at the moment. And then there's new, like these objects that I'm still building on. So yeah, this is the last slide. So yeah, probably there's been many things that I touched upon. Many things that I hope it was a bit coherent, but I'm sure, like I'm really excited also to hear more of your questions. Like about anything, any thoughts, any feedback, any critique, anything basically. So I guess I should give the word back to Till and Swinda to take over.
Okay. We take over now.
Yeah,
Thank you very
so
much.
Yeah.
It was a really nice presentation, and we are really looking forward to the after talk.
Yeah, I will send you the link, and
Cool.
and let's say let's meet in 15 minutes.
15?
So at 15,
Yes.
yeah. So at
Yeah.
18:50.
Sure. Because now we're private again, right?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're just
We're not
saying goodbye
private.
to the audience,
Yeah.
and
All
and then
right.
I will
So-
stop the stream. Okay.
Cool.
Thank you.
So